Speaker Johnson said he was slamming this package for excluding the border security provisions. The Senate bill, he said, is silent on the most pressing issue facing our country, talking about the border. He says he's not going to bring it to the floor if it passes the Senate, which it did, but they could find a way to go around the Speaker.
Right. And he says the reason that the House is not going to bring it up is because it needs border security stuff, which ironically was in the Senate bill last week. But of course, that was kicked to the curb because a bunch of Republicans bailed on it because Donald Trump didn't like it. According to Punchbowl this morning, House leadership believes that they cannot bring this particular Senate bill to the House floor if Johnson wants to remain Speaker. In other words, if they bring it up in the House, he will be gone.
The hypocrisy by Republicans is now so obvious that even Fox's Steve Doocy is calling them out on air. So that we're clear, Mike Johnson's now saying that the House couldn't possibly take up the foreign aid package that just cleared the Senate because it doesn't include border security. The irony being that the Senate did negotiate a bill combining foreign aid with border security, only for Mike Johnson himself to kill it because dear leader Donald Trump preferred the issue over the solution. It's almost like, and I hope you're sitting down for this, Mike Johnson and the Republicans don't actually want to find solutions to any of the problems they complain about on a daily basis. Here's what that hypocrisy looks like when it's put on full display.
We are committed to that. The battle is for the border. We do that first as a top priority, and we'll take care of these other obligations.
We did read through it, Laura, and it did not take long to realize that this is dead on arrival. There's no way we could bring this through the House.
And if you're wondering where that came from, here you go.
The only long-term solution to the crisis and the only way to ensure the endurance of our nation as a sovereign country is for Congress to overcome open borders obstruction.
This is not possible to believe that a thing like this could happen. You already have. You don't need a bill. I had the safest border in the history of our country. We had no bill.
And as far as Trump and his influence on the party is concerned, you've heard the saying, the fish rots from the head. All the while, as Republicans are politicking to give their God King whatever edge he can get in the election, the implications of delaying or outright failing to allocate foreign aid are severe. Ukraine, a democracy, is right now contending with an onslaught by the Russians, led by an authoritarian warmonger. And for those of you thinking, why spend money on Ukraine when we've got problems right here at home? If you think supplemental aid packages are costly, just imagine what it'll cost, both financially and the human toll, if Russia succeeds in Ukraine and goes after Poland or some other NATO country next, which would trigger Article 5 and drag us into a war with a nuclear power. I know that Republicans have the memory of a goldfish, but the last war that we got involved in cost us $8 trillion. And admittedly, math isn't my strong suit, but I feel like $60 million to prevent a Russian takeover might be less than the $8 trillion it cost us last time we went to war. And by the way, this is an issue that I discussed with one of the preeminent authorities on this issue, Senator Chris Murphy.
I agree with you that we've got to do a better job of explaining to people what the consequences are of Russia winning the war in Ukraine. We've kind of gotten used to this post-World War II world in which big countries don't expand their boundaries by invading smaller countries, but anybody who remembers their high school history knows that this is how the world worked all the time. And the United States got dragged into 2 world wars in order to defend our friends from foreign invasions. That will start again. That era will recommence because it's not just Russia that wants to keep moving. China wants to expand their boundaries as well. So if you don't stand up for a little country like Ukraine, or I guess it's not that little, but for a friend like Ukraine right now, you will be sooner than later at war with another big power, and it will be thousands of American young men and women who are dying. This is just a smart, relatively small investment in global security and ultimately in American security.
And by the way, even if the moral incentive isn't strong enough here, there's also a really strong economic incentive because people may think it's expensive to help Ukraine now, but imagine how expensive it would be if the world is engrossed in another war, not just in terms of how much we would have to spend just on the war effort, but just what would happen to the global economy if another war broke out.
Well, and already, you've seen the impact of this war. Part of the story of inflation is the story of, a big part of the world's food supply chain being interrupted in Ukraine and in Russia. So, listen, I'm not saying it's certain that if Putin wins the war in Ukraine, that he will move on to a NATO country. But I think it is certainly inside the Overton window. It is possible. And man, we do not want to be in our lifetime's first ever direct confrontation between two nuclear powers.
Murphy also took to Twitter amid the news that Johnson would not allow the foreign aid bill to the floor for a vote, writing, "The speaker said he wouldn't pass Ukraine funding without a border deal, and we got a deal, and then he killed the deal because he said we didn't need a deal, and now he says he won't pass our Ukraine funding because it didn't include a border deal." Honestly, WTF. Here's the facts. Republicans, including Mike Johnson, will do whatever Donald Trump tells them. If he wanted them to strip down, tar and feather themselves, and walk on their hands onto the floor of the House or the Senate, they would do it. That part is already beyond clear. And Trump will do whatever he feels will help him electorally for the upcoming election. And because he knows how potent of an issue the border is and always has been, after all, we're talking about a party that has been groomed by literal decades of fear-mongering about migrant caravans, he doesn't want to give that up, especially considering he doesn't give a shit about what happens at the border or anywhere. He just wants to be president. If a comet was headed straight for the center of this country, he would root for the comet if it meant that Joe Biden's approval rating would also take a hit. Trump himself admitted that he wants to see the economy crash because it would ultimately redound to his benefit.
When there's a crash, I hope it's going to be during this next 12 months, because I don't want to be Herbert Hoover. The one president, I just don't want to be Herbert Hoover.
So I'm not sure how many more clips I can show of Donald Trump's own words proving that he wants to create new problems and entrench existing ones because they will help him in the election. This isn't about us. It has never been about us. This is about him and his money and his fame and his power. And he will do anything, and even broadcast that he will do anything, to make sure to protect all of those things. The destruction of our lives and our economy and our democracy are all prices that he's willing to pay so that he can consolidate power for himself. So do I have faith that Trump's little supplicants in the Republican Party will defy him and move the foreign aid bill? Not really. But it's our job to keep the pressure on regardless, and let them know that if they want to contract their dignity to a guy who is openly bragging about his willingness to destroy the country for his electoral benefit, then they're not going to get a free pass. To that point, I'll end with these words by the only party's nominee running for president who is not willing to destroy the post-war alliance all for a cheap political win.
By a margin of 70 to 29. To move forward with the bipartisan national security bill. Now it moves to the House. And I urge Speaker Johnson to bring it to the floor immediately. Immediately. There's no question that if the Senate bill was put on the floor in the House of Representatives, it would pass. It would pass. And the Speaker knows that. So I call on the Speaker to let the full House speak its mind and not allow a minority of most extreme voices in the House to block this bill even from being voted on. Even from being voted on. This is a critical act for the House to move. It needs to move. The bill provides urgent funding for Ukraine so it can keep defending itself against Putin's vicious onslaught.
Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to the channel and do your part to help grow the progressive media ecosystem. I don't do sponsorships or paid ads, I won't ask for money, but just subscribing to this channel goes a really long way, and it helps get the message out to more people. The subscribe button is right here on the screen. You can also subscribe to my Spanish language channel, which I made to reach those crucial Spanish-speaking voters. That link is on the screen too. And finally, if you want to listen to my audio podcast, you can follow that link as well. Thanks so much for watching.